Hello and welcome. My name is Karen Freeman and I am Executive Director of Research at the Advisory Board for the Arts. I am delighted to welcome all of you today to our webinar. As we begin today, please note that we've muted everyone's audio and turned off video. This is to make sure the discussion moves smoothly and avoid people talking over one another. And most importantly, it allows us to hear our guests clearly today. If you do have a question at any time, you can simply use the chat box, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. For those of you who have joined us for prior webinars, you'll know that I often play the role of behind-the-scenes producer and Q&A moderator for these webinars. I'm excited to be facilitating today's webinar because, as it happens, my role before joining the Advisory Board for the Arts was as head of digital and analytics learning for consultants at the consulting firm McKinsey & Company. And I've spent many years in corporate learning and development roles in addition to my research roles. So today's topic is very close to my heart. The topic for our discussion, as you can see in our slides today, is rethinking education in the crisis. And we are especially grateful to our guests, Bridget Caviola, who's the Interim Director of Education and Outreach at La Jolla Playhouse, and Kevin Owens, who is a Senior Solutions Manager at Harvard Business School's Corporate Learning Department. We have a great group joining us today, such a impressive and diverse group, including many of our members of the Advisory Board for the Arts. And we are grateful to all of you for joining us at what is definitely a difficult time for everyone. Our plan today is to run this conversation in 3 parts. First, we will all get on a common groundwork by reviewing the goals and different types of virtual education that we can support as arts institutions. Second, we'll have some structured Q&A with Bridget and Kevin. And third, we will open it up to questions that you and other participants have for today's webinar. Now, let me do just a bit of housekeeping before we begin. First, if you have a question at any time, you can type it into the chat box. You'll find that either in the bottom center or top center of your screen, depending on which view of Zoom you're using. I am joined today by my colleague, Pope Ward, who is also of our Advisory Board for the Arts Research Team. And he will keep track of your questions. And during the concluding section of our discussion, he will ask one or more of our guests to respond to as many of those questions as time permits. So please feel free to start entering in your questions right from the beginning. And I'd love to do a quick test just to see how comfortable you all are with the chat function. So please use the chat box to tell us where you're from. You can put in your organization, location in the world, and please let us know your name as well. Let's see how people feel about using the chat box.
Very well.
That is great. Looks like we have a comfortable group with Zoom at this point. I think several weeks into our many of us staying at home, we've all gotten to know Zoom, particularly those of us in the education field who might have had to pick it up rather quickly. So great to see, and great to see such a good and diverse group joining us today. Finally, I do want to talk quickly as part of our housekeeping here about the Arts Resilience Center, which is an initiative of the Advisory Board for the Arts. If you go to our website, advisoryboardarts.com, as you can see on the bottom there, our Arts Resilience Center has all of our webinars, news and resources, and opportunities to review some of the great research that we've done. And we encourage you to take a look there and take advantage of these resources as we wrap up today. So let's get started. I am delighted to introduce our guests. As I mentioned, is Bridget Caviola of the La Jolla Playhouse and Kevin Owens of Harvard Business School's Corporate Learning Group. Let's begin by having you each give us a little bit of your background. Bridget, can I ask you to get started?
Sure. Good morning, Karen. Thank you so much for inviting La Jolla Playhouse to be a part of this discussion and for having us here. I'm humbled to see all of my colleagues from all over the country, from other arts organizations. And prior to my work at La Jolla Playhouse, I've been involved in arts education in some capacity for almost 20 years, and was a high school English and theater teacher for a decade in Baltimore, Maryland, where I'm originally from, and then transitioned to work as a teaching artist and corporate training facilitator using theater strategies. And I'm just delighted to have been at the Playhouse for the last 3 years. And now in my new role as the interim director of education and outreach.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And Kevin, how about you?
Great. Thanks, Karen. And thank you so much for having me today. So my name is Kevin Owens. I have been in learning since the 1900s. In my time, I have developed over 1,000 hours of e-learning. So I'm guessing that might be why Karen invited me today, but also because we were previously colleagues at McKinsey. So I've been specializing in global learning development, in executive leadership, women's learning and diversity inclusion over the last decade around the globe. So I'm currently with Harvard in a solutions role, and I provide solutions for internal and external clients. So my pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And I should mention, we also have a special guest. We're trying a little something new this time. And we have Dr. Marisa Plowman, who is a colleague of Kevin's, who will join by chat. She'll be our virtual chat support, and she is, as she is mentioned in the chat already, online. In the past, we've had more questions than we've had time for in these brief webinars. So we thought that this would be a great opportunity. If you have any questions about developing remote learning, for example, questions about platforms to use, about profiles or personas that you are working to develop that learning for, Marisa is ready and excited to answer your questions. As a detailed point, please do point your questions to her if you want to have her answer them, or you can send her a question directly, as we mentioned earlier, by adjusting who the question gets sent to in your chat box. All right, so as I mentioned before, we want to start with a little bit of groundwork on virtual education. And first, the opportunity that it is right now, even though it can feel like a bit of a challenge for many of us who've been thrust into the world of remote learning sooner than we might have expected. So we'll spend some time on three things. One, the indicators about the extent to which people are adopting remote learning. Two, the different types of remote education and what they're best suited for. And three, the landscape of virtual learning that's being done by arts organizations in response to the coronavirus crisis. We'll then come back to Bridget and Kevin and have them provide their perspectives. So this page that you see here shows some relatively recent polling data from McKinsey about consumer behavior in the United States since the COVID-19 crisis. I'll note that they did this polling internationally with similar results. We're just showing the US data here. And the question that they asked was, have you used or done any of the following since COVID-19 started? And of course, for our purposes, you can see here in the center, there has been quite a jump in the amount of remote learning used both for my children and for myself. So combined, looking across generations, there's a 13% increase in those who either are new or have increased the amount of use, and 12% for those who've done it for themselves. But this belies a real generational gap, as you might imagine, given the ages here. So Generation Z has a 32% increase in using remote learning for themselves. And these are folks who are typically born in the 90s. Whereas those with children, Gen X in particular, those born in the 70s, have a 22% increase in remote learning for their children. So all of this is to say there's been a massive change in our behavior from the crisis, and remote learning is one place with a large increase in a large set of new habits being built. And these habits could potentially last long after the crisis is over. So we want to take advantage of this opportunity and also support our community and our audiences while they are unable to attend our performances. So, and remote learning provides a perfect opportunity to do so. The second thing we want to do is set a bit of ground rules on what we mean by remote learning and learning and development. Typically in learning and development, we talk about learning interventions on 2 dimensions. First, whether it is real time or not. So we'll refer to the real time as synchronous and the not real time as asynchronous. And then the second is how many people we're trying to reach with that intervention. Is it one-to-many or is it one-to-one? And one-to-one would be, of course, fully personalized, and one-to-many can be more interactive or less interactive, a little bit more passive. To make it concrete, we do have a few examples. So thinking about the one-to-many, the more passive kinds of things we would do, we certainly, as we've scanned the world of remote learning interventions in the arts, we've seen many performance videos, podcasts, online lectures, and Facebook live streams. This does tend to be the first set of things that we've seen people start to do. On the synchronous side, now we're starting to see a lot more group classes or private lessons and master classes that people are doing using platforms like this one, Zoom. Unfortunately, as you can see from the asterisks, small timing differences does make it basically impossible to have simultaneous live performance that is sensitive. But we are seeing quite a few private lessons done over Zoom. And then last, the interactive or personalized asynchronous work are things like massively open online courses, resources, or teacher training materials, which can be personalized with things like tests or recorded auditions and reviewed by faculty members. So what are these different types of interventions good for? Well, if we think about the things that are one-to-many, we are certainly benefiting from the fact that they are fast to create and they're very informative. So they're really good for entertaining and raising awareness. But without the ability to practice or a particular skill, it can be challenging for those to be deep behavior change tools. They're really better for informing or entertaining. As we get more interactive in our synchronous learning, we're seeing that there's some real benefits to that. We can use our existing artists to teach these. They are engaging and can provide lots of personal feedback. And while it has been a challenge for many of our teachers to switch over to this platform, in virtual platforms, it has been possible. So it isn't easy, but it has been very possible for people to start to take their existing techniques and move them over to platforms like Zoom. And so it has been a great substitute for in-person education. And last is the area of asynchronous learning. The real benefit to asynchronous or interactive learning is, and this is the world of courseware or curricula, is that it is the sweet spot for learning at scale. So it's the best way to influence a large number of learners. You can build it once and leverage it across a large number of people over time. In the tech world, online coursework has really become the standard practice for most engineers, as they need to keep their technical skills fresh, and they do look to do it on their own time and with those immediate opportunities to practice new coding skills or get credentials that help them with career advancement. So we see that online coursework could become more prevalent, especially since it is a potential mechanism for earned income. Already we're seeing pay what you can Zoom classes, particularly in the worlds of ballet and theater. But the scale of online asynchronous education is what allows it to be an opportunity for earned income even beyond what synchronous learning could be. Now, not every organization is looking to use education to provide earned income, and it's of course important to stay aligned with your mission. But for those who have lost ticket revenue, this could be a real draw. All right, one last slide before we move over to talk some more about learning at La Jolla Playhouse. Our research team at the Advisory Board for the Arts scanned the world of online and remote education that's happening and found a set of innovative learning interventions that are happening all around the world, as you can see here on this page. Now, we're not going to use all of our time today to go through these examples, but we will make all of this available after our call today and through our website, as I mentioned earlier. So I encourage you to scan through them. I'll do a quick overview to the kinds of things you'll find. So all the way over on the right of the page are not actually learning interventions. These are aggregators. How do you get your virtual learning or remote learning found? Here are some examples of places that are starting to, in response to the COVID crisis, collect up live streams or resources for teachers, often by particular area like dance versus theater, and make those easier for people to find now that there's so much more demand. All the way on the left, on the other hand, we have the place where we're seeing the most innovation right now, which is in class-based work, particularly highlighting some places like the English National Ballet has bringing in a number of stars from their from the ballet to teach classes. Seattle Rep has Pay What You Choose classes, and Steppenwolf has designated May as Maker May, has a number of teen classes. Those are some great examples to view. But we're going to be spending a lot of our time today on asynchronous, which you see here in the middle, which takes all forms from all ages resource guides, family guides, and teacher guides through to courses, certificates, and some things that are a little bit more tech-enabled, including a new app from Opera National de Paris. So we have two guests here from that are featured here. So La Jolla Playhouse and Harvard will be able to talk about what they've done. And I'd also like to encourage you, when you look at the website after this, to take a look at two examples that we have noted here. One, Symphony Tacoma has done a great job with Google Classroom building a program to substitute for an in-person classroom experience they were planning to hold in mid-April. And they've pulled a number of great examples and worksheets and small activities and broken it up very nicely into a guided learning experience. And two, we are seeing a bit more increase in the use of credentials, and particularly from an organization called Shed the Music, who has also made a lot of their learning available for free or reduced price and online, and have complemented it with some credentials that people can use to help their learning be recognized, whether as a career opportunity or through social media, and provide some real motivation to complete remote learning. Well, that completes the section to get us grounded in what we are talking about with remote learning. Now, I would love to turn to Bridget and have a conversation about some of the work you've done. Bridget, why don't we start with the kinds of education activities that you're doing at La Jolla Playhouse before, how you think about your strategy and mission for education at La Jolla Playhouse.
Sure, thank you so much. So at La Jolla Playhouse, in our mission, we say we want to provide unfettered creative opportunities for the leading artists of today and tomorrow. So that definitely includes our young learners and our adult learners, and our education program is a robust part of our yearly programming, including having one of our performances, which is called the Pop Tour, that travels around to schools, reaching students in grades 3 through 6, all over San Diego County. And we provide curriculum and pre-show workshops for those teachers and those students to engage with programming. So it's really embedded in the heart and the mission of what we do. So pivoting to meeting people's needs online is a no-brainer for us.
Great. So how has La Jolla Playhouse been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis overall, and how has it impacted education?
Yeah, like so many of our colleagues, we had to make some pretty, quick pivots in terms of what we do. We are a performance venue. We had just opened a really exciting musical on our stage called Fly, a retelling of Peter Pan from Wendy's perspective. We were getting ready to have 500 students come to a student matinee the following week. So the first thing that we did was just really make sure that all of our artists and all of our staff members were taken care of. To this date, we still actually have some of our artists living in artist housing. Most of our performers coming from New York or LA, a lot of them were unsure about our traveling back to New York. And so, we have this resource, and we were really excited to be able to provide that to our artists. We took a look at where we are as an institution. We saw folks, similar regional theaters, posting previous performances, things like that. And we decided that, given our relationship with equity and how we really like to be thinking forward and what is new in the next, we decided to really pivot to a robust online platform of curriculum and entertainment and enrichment. So we have 4 big categories that falls under. We have our LJP, that's La Jolla Playhouse Vault. Here we are looking at the past a little bit. We're having staff members and artists look at previous La Jolla Playhouse performances and talking about the significance of those performances in their lives. Those are both written as well as video. We have our Artist Alley. This is conversations and interactive things with previous La Jolla Playhouse artists. For example, we had a really fun conversation with Walt Spangler, who is set designer for Margaritaville, with our associate technical director, just talking about the technical elements of theater. We have our WOW programming. WOW stands for Without Walls. This is a really exciting thing that we're about to launch, which is our Without Walls Festival takes theater into unconventional spaces. It's site specific, it's edgy, it's risk taking, it's fun, and we're gonna do it virtually. And we have a whole bunch of different programming. We're going to have a piece from our artist in residence this year where you are able to listen and walk around your neighborhood and imagine what might be happening in those houses that you see in your neighborhood. What are the conversations that are happening? That's from the Blind Spot Collective. We have some pieces that you would interact with one-on-one, just with one other artist in a virtual space. And then we have our Create and Learn section, which is where we are providing support and curriculum for educators and for students. We are taking our materials that we already are using in the classroom. For example, we have a really awesome document that we give to all of our teachers we engage with. It's called the LJpedia. It's just full of theater exercises, and we're taking the opportunity now to film those exercises and give teachers the resources when it's their time, because what we've learned is they're not always able, of course we know this, to meet all at the same time. So when they have the time to go and check out a video, they can learn how to use that, not only in their virtual classroom, but when we get back to real-time classrooms, they can do that as well. So we're really excited about that. We're billing them as having brain breaks. We need those in our classrooms. Our teachers need brain breaks. They're overwhelmed too. So topics, everything from a theater game to how to do a simple choreography step, things like that. We're also in that Create and Learn section working on curriculum that's really driven by our mission. So projects that would allow teachers to devise an original piece of theater with their students, given the time that we're in. Let's make art, and let's talk about what's happening through our art.
That's an incredible array of things you have that you've adjusted in light of a pretty fast change. What have you found most challenging to make this pivot?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of challenges. Obviously, we're all aware that there's a lot of inequity when it comes to technology and who has access to it and when. So that is a complication. And we are a theater organization, and we thrive on in-person interaction. And there's no rule book on how to take things that are supposed to be felt and seen in person and take it to a virtual level. Mm-hmm. So trying to translate that is a nuanced experience. And I will say it's so impressive to be working with the team that I'm on, just in terms of hitting the ground running and transitioning to that. So those are some of the challenges. Also, we're really trying to reach out to our teachers and our community, and our partners at the district level, to find out what teachers need. And the thing that they really need the most of is training and how to teach online, because so many of them are just experts at what they do in the classroom, especially our arts teachers. But there is so many more challenges that come to teaching an arts classroom virtually, and so that's what they need. And we're also trying to support them with professional development, to think about creative ways to take what they already know how to do to a virtual setting.
What are some examples of that? I know any real helpful nuggets that you found in learning how to teach online?
Well, the same thing applies in the classroom as it is online, which is timing, right? I mean, we all know that it's hard to sit and Zoom for long periods of time. So chunking out lessons, especially in our professional development we're working on for teachers, we're looking at short, really dense videos and content that they can watch on their own. So making sure that the timing is relevant and important to that. That there's also opportunities for working with students who may have disabilities, and thinking about that this particular platform is not, especially Zoom or Google Classrooms, is not necessarily suited for everyone. And what are the best practices for inclusion in working virtually? So we're trying to build those things into our curriculum as well, to support teachers in reaching those students.
That's great. And how are you thinking? Oh, actually, looks like there's a question that came through around your partnership with teachers. How many teachers are you reaching, and how are you reaching them? Did you have your own contacts before? Are you working through the districts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we have a large amount of teachers that we impact throughout our school year with our in-school programming. We also have really rich partnerships with the San Diego County Office of Education, and within that, within our county, we have 42 school districts, which we have had the ability to work with through our pop tour, through our student matinee program, through our in-school residencies and programming. So we're really trying to support those teachers that have already been a part of the work that we're doing. But yes, because of those partnerships we have with the county office, they're able to get information out to their students. We have a really nice relationship with the theater resource teacher for San Diego Unified, and so she is hungry to gather information to disseminate to her teaching staff.
Great. One other question before we'll switch over to Kevin. There's a couple of questions around tracking. How do you see how things are getting used? How do you know if it's working? How do you know its impact?
Yeah, that's a good question. And data is always the hardest thing to track for arts educators, I think, because we're so knee deep in the curriculum and the work of it. Our marketing and communications department does an amazing job of keeping track of who interacts with us on our website, our social media, and our YouTube. So those experiences that we're having, but we're really relying on our partners to help us understand. We also have a really nice relationship with, there's a collective of theater teachers in San Diego County who meet regularly. So I'm able to just have, one-on-one conversations with them too about what's working, what's not working, what would you like to see? How is this helpful for you?
Great. I see we have a number of other questions. What I will do is we'll switch over and give Kevin a chance to talk about what some of the work she's done and some advice she has for those who are developing remote learning for the first time, but certainly happy to come back to those in our open Q&A. Kevin, would love to switch to you. You have decades of experience working with organizations on creating learning assets. How would you advise people to think about starting to generate a remote learning strategy?
Sure. So I'm going to approach this somewhat from out in. So look at the big picture and talk a little bit about organizational needs and then learner needs. So, it's important to remember that learning isn't, and always never has been, a one size fits all. So when you're taking an approach to building out learning courses, you want to keep in mind that all learners are different, and there are multitudes of ways to craft courses uh, that work for a variety of individuals. So a little bit about what we're going to focus on today is just paying attention to the user experience. So keeping in mind your organizational needs, but then building for the user and breaking out what we would call a user persona. So building the learning objectives with your mission in mind, the mission of your organization in mind, but also building a learning persona and answering some pretty key questions. What does what does your student look like? What are they looking to achieve? What's the outcome that you'd like for them in this experience? And then also obviously keeping in mind, what are the parameters that you are working in as well from a timing and technology perspective.
Got it. Really helpful. Could you give us maybe an example of a persona that you've developed for on a fast time cycle?
Oh, sure. Yes. So a common persona for me, obviously, is I manage a lot in leadership. So I might be looking at someone who's a first-time executive. So they've been in a leadership or a business role for a number of years, but is their first time as an executive. They have a certain period of time in which to learn, and they have certain times of year that are available to learn. And I also look at what appeals to them most. Is it short burst learning? Is it video? Is it in person? Face-to-face learning virtually, and build a persona that looking at what's most important to them and what's going to be the most appealing experience for them to learn.
Got it. I know one of the real challenges with remote learning can be keeping people motivated through coursework, particularly if it's asynchronous remote learning. What are some lessons learned you have on how to keep people motivated through remote learning? And there was a question in the chat box that came up earlier around the value of credentialing as a motivator. So if you can talk to that too, that would be really helpful.
Oh, absolutely. So we're seeing it, we've seen probably a surge in the last 5 years more in credentialing. And this is happening across the board from organizations, business and the arts and really around the globe. Just a more popular practice is to actually credential your courses. For the individual, the motivator there is, intrinsic. It is, I have accomplished something. I have this holds greater value because there is credentialing and badging behind it. It's also a piece of marketability. So in business, credentialing for different courses that you have achieved is very similar to having your BS or your master's. It's giving you a badge that you can represent publicly that you have a new skill or capability or certification.
Sure. And coming from an educational institution, has Harvard, or have you considered the interaction of some of the more formal credentials with some of these less formal micro credentials or badging?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very great point, that micro-credentialing is actually on the rise as well. And that, the opportunity for credentialing and having a more, robust portfolio is what we're seeing, and a lot of motivation behind our learners.
And one person was hoping for a quick explanation of what we mean by credentialing. Do you have a pocket definition of, what counts as a credential, how it gets used in learning and development?
Sure. So organizations can work. So let's take Harvard, for example. So we work specifically to create credentials, Harvard badging, for different programs that we offer. We also work with our clients, which might be a position that you're in if you're working with a partnering organization to create a badge for something that you're offering. And that badge is awarded. It explains what the person has been through, maybe if it's capability building, or in this case, a leadership credentialing. That they can then add to their LinkedIn profile or their auto signature to represent what they've learned. Pardon me.
Got it. Very helpful. And I know one of the common questions that we get around developing remote learning very quickly is around the best technology to use. And can you give us a sense of some of the tools that you found easiest to use? Oops, I'm going to skip ahead to this next slide for you. The tools that you found easiest to use for different types of learning, and any recommendations you have for people who are getting started with them.
Sure. So as you can see here, we've kind of laid out what makes the most sense, whether you're building something that's synchronous or asynchronous, and then also who you're appealing to who you are appealing to. Is this a one-on-one learning event? Is it interactive where you maybe have small groups, or do you want to go out to a more grand scale? So there are a wide variety of tools to use. These are a few, and what I would say are the most popular. So, and as some of you might be now homeschooling your children or partners or etc. You may see some of these that look familiar, like Blackboard or Canvas or Google Classroom. For actual e-learning development, you'll see more tools like Articulate or Adobe Captivate, Lessonly, and Brainshark. For massive play like we're doing today, you obviously can use Zoom. You can record and upload to a YouTube or your website, and then also obviously Facebook Live is another like very popular tool that a number of people use. So what you want to keep in mind is here, kind of going back to that user-centric development, is what's going to be the best experience for your learner, what's going to be the best experience for the student, and what's the outcome that you want as an organization and for these individuals.
Helpful. And as one question that we also tend to get for developing learning, given you're coming from a corporate environment, is the appetite for corporate use of arts learning. Have you seen a lot of demand for arts in the corporate world? For example, would theaters or ballet organizations be able to provide to a broader audience through corporate learning some assets that could be used by the organization?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And now more than ever, because as we have made pardon me, whether we wanted to or not, a shift to more virtual learning, there's a much greater need for attention management and attention restoration. And that's what we're seeing in corporate learning. And the first go-to in attention restoration and management are the arts. It's entertainment, it's nature. Like, what is going to give you back that joy and help you restore your attention and passion then for learning more. And the arts are a great way to do that. So I see a number of opportunities that we're already blending it into learning journeys. So I think there's a great way for them to work together.
And there's a question going back to the platform ones. Any recommendations, and Bridget, I may come to you as well, around the best platforms if you're going to be working with children?
Sure. So, I mean, Blackboard obviously has been around for a long time in the actual exchange of content with children. If you are looking at the interaction in real-time scenarios, quite honestly, we see that Zoom and Hangouts are really easy for people to learn. They have a low bandwidth. They have a buffered load stream. So, as you can see today, I know I'm turning my video on and off because I'm in this wonderful, in the middle of the country with satellite connection, and it's not great Wi-Fi, but it's still working out pretty well on Zoom. So I think take that into consideration. But in working with children, you obviously want to, like, if we're going back to the user persona, what is their skill level? What will they be able to do? Is someone else going to be engaging them? And then what are you looking to get from them? So are you going to be asking them to record and upload? So you would take that into consideration. And if that is something that you're looking to do, I think Zoom is a great tool.
Really helpful. And there's another question that came through. It's around how to break through the noise. So what's your advice? We're seeing just a real explosion of learning, given how much remote learning people are now consuming. Any suggestions for what's going to make it stand out, or how to think about tailoring it or focusing on the needs more in a way that will be easier for the learner to understand and appreciate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it kind of comes back to what appeals to them in person? Really, what works for you in a live environment? Many may very well translate in a technical environment, in a digital environment. It's just the way that you do it, right? So the same, the environment, the sound, the energy, all of that still matters, whether you are in person or virtual. So it's really like how you manage that. Cutting through the noise. Yes, there is a lot out there, but we've also seen, as Karen highlighted, some great programs that are making waves. And it's, I think that that's really working with your internal marketing teams, finding your strategy, like what is going to be your hook and what is going to bring people in, and keeping that user experience in mind, that outcome of what you're looking for them, and for an ongoing kind of sustained experience, like what's going to keep bringing them back. That I think is how you set yourself apart from others. And I would just say, I think we kind of skipped over a little bit of the design, but something that you can do in practice is to incorporate a hook. So I was going to talk about just kind of a very simple design technique that I recommend to clients, especially those who might be new to learning design, this learn, practice, and reflect. And in the reflection piece of building, we ask people to kind of compare where they were in the beginning and where they are at the end. And sometimes even write about it or reflect back. So in the arts, let's say, for example, you want them to record something, a skill or something that they have improved through this learning, and they could mark it with a hashtag that is your organization, and that is the hook, that is the marketing. So you're kind of incorporating through the learning back into your organizational's mission and sustainment of this learning journey. I hope that makes sense.
It did. Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I realized also, we have this learn, practice, reflect technique for design, and generally a overall framework that we all know is important to actually lead to behavior change when someone is trying to learn something. But one of the things we didn't really get a chance to talk about earlier was techniques for keeping someone's attention in remote learning. We talked about credentialing as one of them. It sounds like using hooks in the case of practice, or maybe even using entertainment is another one. Do you have any other examples or suggestions for how people think about keeping learners engaged when they are so surrounded by distractions?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all can relate to this. But so engaging content matters. So present the content in an engaging way, meaning, use blended types of engagement, like video, live facilitation, gaming. Different options appeal to different types of learners. So the more that you can use, the better. Now, obviously, you don't want to throw everything in. So choose which support your content best, but obviously try to engage them with like polls or interactivity. If you have some options for peer sharing in the platform that you're using, that can be a very engaging tool to use in the learning piece. It also translates then into practice. So sharing within peer groups and exercises to solve a problem, allowing them to try something and fail on their own and then learn from it, is a great engagement tool within practice.
Very helpful. Thank you. Actually, I'll turn it back to Bridget with one of the questions we got earlier. We talked about how to get your learning and the new types of learning interventions that you have available, how to get that noticed. What are some of the things that La Jolla Playhouse is doing to help people find the work that you're doing and help get some attention?
Yeah, well, one thing that our communications team has done is, work our website a little bit to create a central hub where all of this information can be found. So that's a really nice way to send a link to our donors, our supporters, our educators, so that they have a one-stop shop for finding programming, which then links to our social media and our other resources. We have just a really robust social media campaign, and are connecting our audiences not only just here locally, but are connecting to audiences that we've never seen before, which is super exciting on a global scale. Obviously, like social media is still the number one for connecting with folks. Instagram, we're getting our teen council to put something together on TikTok, since I know that kids are, now I feel really old saying that, but I know the kids are interacting on TikTok. So yeah, trying to use all the social media platforms.
Yeah, actually, I think you're mentioning your website, and I will say one of the things I noticed when I went to the site is how dramatically it has changed, right? You actually don't see much in the way of uh, recommendations for in-person events at all. In fact, it's all about how you can engage with La Jolla Playhouse uh, uh, virtually, or while people are staying at home. Have you seen? I mean, perhaps this is a question more for the marketing team, but what is the sense of whether that change has made a big difference?
I think they're starting to see it. I think what's exciting is we have en masse support from our board and our donors. They really get behind the forward thinking that we have, and they love that we have adjusted and pivoted to thinking about how can we still provide these really unique performance opportunities for our audiences, given the current climate that we're in. We are still, of course, working on our season, and we were set to begin rehearsals for our new season April 2nd. So that had to be an immediate shift. So we are still working diligently on that programming and scheduling. But yeah, we wanted to dive headfirst into being able to provide this really exciting content for our patrons near and far.
It sounds like it has really attracted some people you might not have been able to reach before. I wanted to shift a little bit. There were some questions for you, Kevin, around if people want to learn more about how to embed hooks, or how to find examples of great motivational components as they're building out learning. Any places you would recommend someone go for a fast um, education of their own?
Oh my goodness, that's a really great question. There are a number of resources. I have a handful that I typically recommend. I'd be happy to share after the call. I think that would be just. I don't want to play favorites on record.
All right. Well,
because there are just
we'll
so
keep
many
those
great resources.
secret for now, and we'll if you can share those with us, we'll go ahead and add those to the recap that we send out after this call, and onto our website. And of course, encourage those who are. We have some real active participation on the chat. So if there's some of you who have some resources that you've relied on so far, would love to hear those, and we can collect those and share those out with the group. There's been quite a bit of active conversation around safety for children, for example. And so if those of you who have experience in or recommendations for how to ensure that as we're reaching out to children that we're keeping everybody safe, I'm happy to share those as well. Bridget, coming back to you, we had a question around budgeting for something like this. It seems like this has been a big change for your organization from going in person to classrooms. How have you been tracking or keeping track of budgeting? Has your budget expanded or contracted in the midst of all of this? How have you been thinking about using your budget most effectively for remote learning?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely have done several budget relooks, especially since, again, like I mentioned, our season was supposed to begin April 2nd with rehearsals, and that is actually the top of our fiscal year. So we were in the process of wrapping up the end of our fiscal year. We had to cancel our gala. We were just days away from that. So pretty major adjustments in terms of looking at that as a big source of support, and then also our subscription patrons and folks that still had tickets to our performances, looking at opportunities to ask them, would you like to contribute to the Playhouse? Would you like to postpone your subscription? Things like that. So we have been certainly looking at our budget pretty much on a weekly basis. We have to adjust and change. I saw another question there about monetizing any of these programming. Where at this point, everything we've been offering in terms of educational programming has been free. However, we are getting ready to start some pay for programming starting next week. We'll be offering in our Spotlight On series, that's classes for adults. So we'll be having some pay for programming, but that is significantly reduced, up to 60-70% reduced off of what we would normally charge for an in-person class, because we want to be a supportive member of the community. We want to provide these exciting educational opportunities, but also understand that we're piloting something new. This is a new road for us that we're going down. And so just as we want our patrons to come and see new work on the stage with us and let it be in process, we're in process of this. We are also going to be launching some virtual educational programming for our summer camps this summer. That is definitely a sharp pivot. We have a really rich on-site youth training program in the summer, but there are certain things that are really integral to our mission that we don't want to let go of, such as our conservatory program, which is a training program for high school students, 10th through 12th grade. So nothing, it will all be virtual. And there is an exciting phrase that I heard from one of our partners, which is boundaries are freeing. So we have all these like really interesting new boundaries now, and we are innovators, we're artists. So how do we think about using these boundaries in a new way and capitalize on the moment that we're in, especially with young people? I was on another panel with Educational Theater Association last week, and they asked me, what are you excited about, that could come out of this? And I said, I'm excited to see what the young artists are going to create 20 years from now. What's going to be the musical, that comes out of this experience? I know you asked about budget, but I got excited talking about the art. So yeah, we're definitely shifting and adjusting on a weekly basis, and these new classes that are paid for, we'll have to see how they go.
Mm-hmm.
If people are interested in doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, actually, and it sounds like that could provide you with some real impact measurement as in addition to seeing how teachers are adopting some of the materials that you provide. You also can kind of see through the charging mechanisms, the impact or the budget benefit that you can get from it.
Sure.
I guess one would love to hear a little bit more about your summer program. As you talked about boundaries being freeing, are there some places where you're really testing the boundaries that you're most excited about?
Yeah, I'm really excited because a big component of, we call it YP, which is Young Performers, a big component of that is allowing young people to engage in the process of theater. So our summer programs are not performance driven, they're really process driven, and getting students to work as an ensemble to create an original piece of theater is a big component of our summer programming when we are face to face. And so we want to think about how can we provide that creative opportunity for young people to interact not just with students in their community, but now we have this opportunity to reach students everywhere, to work together to create an original piece of theater that is site specific, meaning how can we do it virtually and what are the opportunities? And I'm sure that our young people, this will be for middle schoolers and high schoolers, that they will come to us with platforms, with ideas, with innovation that we haven't considered, to create an original piece of theater that's never been seen before, but that will be out of the minds of those young folks, guided by one of our master teaching artists. So I'm really excited about that. And then also thinking about how do we take a college preparatory conservatory program and make it virtual. And in the discussions we've had, a lot of these students want to be able to say on their resumes and applications they've participated in this program, but what a unique opportunity for them to say, I participated in a brand new pilot of a virtual conservatory.
Mm.
And it does get us thinking about, how we could potentially provide these kinds of opportunities outside of a crisis. But we're always so, in the moment and face to face that we haven't had time to process what that could look like. And now we're having that opportunity to think about how we can serve people on a broader scale, given the use of technology and in creating training that is sustainable.
Really helpful. I would love to just ask one last question, and then we'll wrap things up, which is just around, you can't predict the future, but how do you think all of this is likely to impact the way you operate once you're able to meet in person again? Is there some things that you've now learned that you'll apply to your in-person?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, having a little bit of time to create content that can be used over and over again is huge. I mean, we rely so much on in-person training, and we know that people's schedules are complicated. And so being able to do that is going to be, I think, pretty huge for us. And having that kind of arsenal of training opportunities that we can then potentially partner with, one of our universities. We're on the campus of UCSD. How could we take, for example, an arts integration professional development model that we've created and allow teachers to get a certificate or a badge or something like that towards their professional development? And these are things we always kind of have talked about, but haven't had the opportunity to focus on. I think this is going to open a lot of doors and conversations around working with students with disabilities and students in non-traditional school settings. A lot of those students are denied access to the arts because of whether it's a physical limitation or, if you are in a non-traditional school setting at home, you may not be included in the arts programming because they are typically collaborative, which is something we love. But in this moment, it's forcing all of us to think about collaboration in a different way, and how I think those students who haven't been able to participate will have more options to participate.
It's interesting how you say that lesson that constraints can be freeing, right? You're learning a lot about constraints, and it's offering a lot of change to how you might operate in the future. I know we are coming up at time. I want to give the big thank you to both Bridget and Kevin for joining us today and offering your insights. I know we haven't covered all of the questions. We'll try to cover as many of them as we can afterwards. I wanted to remind you that we will be sending you this webinar information tomorrow. You'll also receive our weekly email that has summary of this. We have another webinar scheduled for next week. We will be inviting some journalists from the Atlantic Monthly to talk about their experience with how to communicate and support the community through the coronavirus crisis. So very excited, and please feel free to email register@advisoryarts.com to receive all of our invites if you haven't already gotten them. Otherwise, if you're on our mailing list, you'll receive it as usual. We are a membership organization, so if you have any questions about membership, please contact us and let us know. We would be delighted to welcome you into our membership. And in my last minute, I would love to get your feedback. So we have a very quick poll. We'd love to know how likely it is that you would recommend this webinar to a friend or colleague. We will leave this poll up for a few minutes past the hour, but for now, to close us off, I want to say thank you to Bridget and Kevin and Marisa for all of your thoughtful contributions. Thank you so much for your time. And to everyone, if there's any way that we at the Advisory Board for the Arts can be helpful to you personally, your teams, your organizations, especially in these difficult times, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to help. So please be well, stay safe.